This looks cool.
This is actually where Lovecraft, like, got the idea. This is where Lovecraft got all the inspiration from this dish.
No drawings today? No pretty pictures? Nobody wants it? Sad. Sad.
There's like a weird vibration just shoving together.
All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the 8th meeting of Game Development Club this semester. And welcome back from spring break. How did general, yes, good, bad spring break? How we doing? Good, good. I'm seeing goods. Any bads? Anybody have a terrible spring break? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't do anything for you, but whatever. I'm a little bit sick today, so bear with me if I start hacking up along halfway through, or if I sound like garbage. Too bad. Yeah, it's true. All right, thanks. Appreciate it. All right, so first things first, announcements. Same old for most of it. First of all, this week in Workspace, Nate, I believe, is hosting a workshop where we're basically doing a challenge workshop. So if you've come to the workshops before, or I mean, I guess if you haven't, but if you are looking for some challenge, if you're looking for just an extra thing to do, we're going to be basically giving you I believe it'll be in Unity. We'll be giving you something to start with, and we'll give you some goals, and we'll say, okay, go through it, and then let's review what you would do through it, what you would do for that. Did you have anything to add about that?
Well, yeah, that's it.
Cool. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Come, it'll be cool. Again, we always do this, but still, if you want to get publicity for your game, tell one of the execs before the meeting starts, during announcements, after announcements, sometime during there. We'll give you a couple minutes to show what you've got, even if it's just an idea, and talk about it so you can try and get some help from people working on it and all sorts of stuff. Still got our weekly stream going, so if you're interested in that, sign up after the meeting. We have the sign up sheet right here. You can bring your own game, you can play that, or if you don't, you can play whatever we pick. Too bad. So sad.
Or you can just look at my Steam library for like 5 seconds.
That's, yeah.
We have enough time to download it.
True, yeah, that works too. So we still got that. Partner Jam coming up soon, very soon. I think we're 3 weeks away.
Yeah, 3 weekends.
Something like that. Yeah, like 3 weeks away. We have prizes at this one. Hype. We've got, like we said, the Fallout 4 Pip-Boy edition for PS4, and then Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas, and Fallout 4 Steam codes. And that's 2 of all of that, so double it. Call in now, you get the second one free. So that's why it's a partner jam. We got 2 of them, so get hyped for that. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Huge. All right, so today's topic I wanted to cover is design documents, which isn't particularly flashy or interesting, but it's really, really useful for getting your ideas down and making your project work. So first of all, who knows what a design document is? Can I get a show of hands? Does anybody care to give their shot at explaining roughly what it is? Yeah.
The main, like whoever is like had the idea for the game, they're trying to put down all of their ideas in a cohesive and understandable way as possible.
Exactly. That's basically exactly what it is. So I have some details here. So basically, kind of like what Aiden said, it is a living document with the details of your game on it. So, and what I mean by living is that you should be updating your design doc. It should not be set in stone, written in one go, and then keep it. It should be something that you update as you come up with ideas, that you change, that you manipulate. It should be something that lives, it changes over time until it gets to the point where you're happy with it. And one of the biggest reasons that you write one of these is so if you give your document to somebody and you say, read this, by the time they're done reading it, they should understand what your vision is for your game. They should be able to say, oh, I know what game you're trying to make. I can tell what you're trying to make, I can see it, I can work with you, I can understand it. So you want to make it really descriptive. You are allowed to compare it to other games. That's something that I've seen a lot of questions about, is can I throw in other game information in there? Absolutely. It's strictly for the use, this is strictly for internal use. So your project team, or if it's just you, only you, whatever that is, they'll be the only ones looking at it. You don't really need to worry about it going public or doing anything else with it. So if your game can most easily be summed up as this game meets this game with these features, that's totally fine. You can throw that in, and that might make it super obvious for what it is if it's a game people have played. If it's a really obscure game, then it probably won't help anybody, but you know. Another thing is, don't put in too much detail. This is kind of a weird topic, or this is kind of a weird part of it, because some people say, oh, well, you should put in plenty of detail. If your game has 30 power-ups, you should detail what those 30 power-ups are, all of them. And I'll get into what I mean by that in a second, in the next, whatever page is next about that. But moving on, your design document should really only be changing when you're still coming up with ideas. When you sit down and you start the production phase, I hate saying that because it makes it sound like business, not game making, but when it reaches that phase of you're actually going to sit down and make the game, you need to stop updating your design doc. You could still put down new ideas. Put them down in all sorts of places. Write them down on a whiteboard. Keep that updated. Do something. But your design document should basically be the soul of your game. It should be what is your game in essence. So you shouldn't be changing that after you've started working on it. You shouldn't be changing what your vision is. If it's something that will probably change, write in your design document that this will probably change, rather than trying to change it later, if that makes sense. And finally, you'll want to use this as sort of a guide for developing your game, because like I said, it should be the soul of your game. So if you're looking to make a change in your project, if you're saying, you know what, this first-person shooter is pretty cool, but I think the main character should be able to fly. I think that'd be a pretty cool mechanic. And then you look at your design doc and you realize, you know what, that doesn't really fit with the other parts of it. That would require major overhauls, and that doesn't really just fit our soul that we've picked for our game. It just doesn't really work out. That might help you decide whether to put it in the game or not. You might put it in anyways and say, fuck it, why not? But it's sort of there so that you can reference it and make sure you're following your original vision and making the game that you set out to make in the first place. Good? Anything to add? In what it is?
You cover everything else. No one has questions.
all right. So now that we know what a design doc is, the purpose of it, there's a few things that go into it. So I'm going to run through each of these one by one. So first of all, the platform. This is not necessary for all game design docs. You do not need to put in the platform. Actually, all of these are optional, except probably gameplay. You probably need to play your game to have it be a game. But a lot of these are actually optional and it depends on what kind of game you're making. So platform would be really important for, say, your game's VR. And you kind of need to specify what platform it is. If you're focusing on like the Vive, like the hand shit, then you probably need to specify that you're doing the hand shit. Otherwise, everybody will, the person reading it won't have a clear idea of what you're talking about. So depending on what kind of game you're making, the platform, you should write that down. The genre is pretty important. This can help. This again just helps with that descriptive language of just the person reading it gets a better idea of what you're actually trying to make. This is again where you can compare it to other games, and I mean Metroidvania, that term is thrown out so much that it doesn't even mean anything at this point. Might not hurt to still put it in, Like it still helps describe some things. So this is mostly useful just for trying to get somebody to understand what kind of general game you're trying to make. Gameplay is a huge one, obviously. The gameplay will probably take up the majority of the design doc, or at least more than any other one, because this will cover all parts of how your game is going to play. How is it going to go? You can put things like, what are your game mechanics? What are the goals of your game? What are the skills someone needs to be able to play your game? And I don't mean like get good. I mean like the ability to tap on a screen if it's a mobile game, Like it helps just put that down, even if it sounds kind of silly. How your game's progression works, is it a levels-based system? Is it gear-based? How's that going to play in, et cetera, all sorts of different things that you can throw in there. And that should go into a pretty large amount of detail. You shouldn't be too general with that. You can get pretty specific. Setting is like the background of your game. So it's like, Mario, you'd say, you're a plumber. The princess has been kidnapped by the big Koopa Bowser guy, him. That would sort of just be the setting of like providing a backdrop so the person reading your document can understand, okay, how is this game being set up in the very first place? Story is how you go from there. So you work, that usually comes right after the setting because it wouldn't really make sense in reverse order. And basically, after you set this backdrop, you say, okay, now what actually happens in this game? This is actually a part that is very optional. You don't need a story section if you're making, no, don't do that again. Anyways. Yeah, great, cool. All right, I'll just keep talking because too bad. So story is basically what is actually going to happen in your game. And this is the point where you actually don't want to go into too much detail. This is sort of what I meant. If you are giving every line of dialogue in your game, that's stupid. Take a step back, delete all that, and sum it up. You don't need to go into a huge amount of detail with your story. If you're writing the design doc for Kingdom Hearts, you'll probably need like 80 pages anyways, but even that's the condensed version. Like you still wouldn't write all of the details because good lord, that would be awful to read. You want the person reading your document to be able to read it in a reasonable amount of time. You don't want them, if you have a really long game, if your game is Kingdom Hearts and it's got all this story shit thrown in there, maybe it takes a couple sittings to read it, but it shouldn't be super long. You should sum things up. And like I was saying before the projector went AWOL, this doesn't necessarily need to be a section in your design doc. Somebody raise your hand, doesn't matter. Give me the story of Space Invaders.
I don't fucking know.
Yeah, there's no story. You just shoot the things. That's it.
Have the armada of aliens got in your way?
Is that the setting or the story?
It's both.
It's kind of the setting. Like the setting's not the setting exists for that game. There's aliens coming down, and the player must shoot them. Great. There's no story. There's no progression. There's no love interest for the square at the bottom. There's no square. There's no matching square that it's interested in. Not really.
That's where you're wrong.
Around like conquering, it gets weird.
It gets. then the visual novel part starts, and it gets
I
crazy.
actually wrote a webcomic for Galaga. It was really interesting.
So my point is, all of these different parts of it don't necessarily have to be in your design doc. It doesn't necessarily have to have a lot of content, but they're good things to remember because some games do have a lot of story. What was the next one? It's really squished. The next one I had was art style. Basically, what should the game look like? This is another one that doesn't necessarily need to be set in stone. but it's a good idea to throw in what you're thinking. Or, I mean, if your game revolves around the art style, maybe just specify and keep it set in stone. If you're making a game with claymation as your animation, you should probably specify that and base a lot of stuff on it and write a lot of detail about how that exactly is going to go. But again, if your game's art style isn't as important, maybe it's something that you'd change later and you'd write, well, here's a few ideas. Next one was music and sound direction that you can put in there. If you're Zach, you wouldn't even include this in your document. You wouldn't even think about it, apparently. But it's a good idea to throw in generally what kind of vibe you want to set with your music, what kind of sound effects you want to go for. If you have super specific things, absolutely throw them in there. And you know, if your game's Space Invaders, you probably don't need much of a section for that. It's probably just bleep bloop for pretty much every sound effect and no music. Space Invaders doesn't have music, does it? It just does the no? Am I wrong? Was that impression not good enough to jog your memory? That's fair. All right. And the last one I have on here is marketing. This is one that you can is absolutely optional. But if you have some info on it, it doesn't hurt to write down. Basically, like, what is your target demographic? Like, who are you trying to market this game to? Because that might actually clarify a lot of things if you're reading someone else's design doc and they say, I'm marketing this towards preschoolers trying to learn the English language. That might give you a very clear understanding all of a sudden of how this game was supposed to work as you were trying to figure out what they were doing. So, and then also, you know, what is your actual marketing strategy? If you're planning to do a Kickstarter, throw that in. A lot of marketing sections of design docs are sort of just rough ideas thrown in a list of, we could maybe do a prototype level, maybe do a Kickstarter based on that, maybe release a demo before it comes out, kind of just bullet points, just throwing out ideas. Doesn't necessarily have to be set in stone. And then the final thing is anything else important enough. There's plenty more that you can put in, and if you feel like it is essential to understanding your game, throw it in, doesn't hurt. And I mean, feel free when you're writing a design doc to throw in ideas and specify that they are ideas. To say, I think this would be cool, or this might be a good idea, and make it clear that it's up for grabs of whether you'll actually do it. That you could change it at a later time. It doesn't hurt to throw in ideas like that in there.
I don't know if you're going to get to this later, and if you are, sorry.
That's fine.
When you're considering what to put in there, consider what you're going to use your document for. There's really only two uses for this document. Either you're using it, or actually you use both of them. You're using it for yourself and the team you're making with. Your design document is your roadmap, pretty much. You know, the artist and the writer in the group should be able to refer back to the document to know how they should be setting the tone and the art style they need to have, and examples of that art style. And if you're doing this for the second reason for you know, marketing, trying to get people to fund your game, that's a big reason to have the design document. Because you know, when you go to investors and you say, hey, I need $500,000 to make this 2-year project, they'd like to know kind of what you have in mind for that. So keeping as many details as you can, you know, that's relevant to the investor and what they want to see. It's a good idea. So if you're going to be if you're going to be using this to secure funds for your game, consider that when you're making this document. Consider, you know, wording your things in such a way that, you know, the investors, whoever you're talking to, can understand and get the concept. If it's just, you know, strictly internal, you'll probably know your team and know what they know and what references they'll get, and you can include that kind of stuff in your document. Just depends on how you're going to use it.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, and if you're doing it for marketing, that actually also goes into pitch documents. which should be substantially shorter and much more to the point of just trying to get sort of like that minimum viable product of shortening things to where they can get an idea of where you want to take the project, but you wouldn't be putting in all of the details of other stuff, of all of the details of like every game mechanic. They don't care about that. They don't want to read an 80-page paper about all your power-ups. They want to read that there are power-ups and here's a couple examples and great, let's move on. So, but yeah, that definitely comes into play. So now I want to go into some general just tips of making a good design doc. First of all, it might not be that easy to read between the lines. Sometimes you need to specify things that aren't actually in the game, but sort of go behind the game. I don't know how to word that better. So let's say making a first-person shooter, and you are trying to teach them a new mechanic that you're putting in. You're trying to teach them, didn't one of the Call of Duties have a wall riding mechanic or something? Say you're trying to teach them that. Well, the first time you do it, you're not over a pit that kills you. You're just trying to get up an alleyway, up into a door. Well, the second time, if you fail that jump, there's some consequences. And the third time, if you fail that jump, you die. That's something that's not that easy to explain when you're just talking about game mechanics, but it's something that you absolutely should specify in your design doc somewhere, saying that there is this that there's this increasing risk as the challenges go on, so the player doesn't feel like they're being cheated. They feel like if they're failing it, it's their own fault, yada yada. That's an example of something that is sort of goes into the soul of your game, but not necessarily the body. That's not something that you'd write about when you're talking about the actual game mechanics. If you're talking about wall jumping, you'd specify how wall jumping works, but then you might add on another section that says, well, here's how we treat it and how we treat the risks associated with it. Second point, demonstrate things if need be. What I mean by that is sometimes you can't explain it with words perfectly. Sometimes you need to add a rough sketch or even a rough animation if you want to sit down and draw some frame by frames to show an idea of what generally it should look like. And that's not a bad thing at all. You shouldn't rely on it though, because you can explain a lot with words, and it's much easier to go through and see all of the different points with words. But sometimes, a sketch can speak 1,000 words. You can draw, if you're trying to explain how someone's ornate, intricate armor looks, that's going to take forever of trying to detail all the different parts of it. But a rough sketch might give a better understanding alongside it. What's up?
Would one example of this be good stuff about the pitch, the Rabbids Mario pitch for the XCOM like battling on Switch? What was it?
Like trying to go over the gameplay mechanics?
Yeah, and actually showed them, they had tested it so they had a board and could show people.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great point of like a physical board.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they're the Mario Rabbids game is kind of like XCOM. Has anybody not heard of either of those? You're not in trouble. I'm trying to see if I need to explain more. And I think we're generally good. So basically they made a almost board game looking thing so they could physically show what they mean by certain mechanics, right? Okay, yeah. I'm just making sure that I'm not making stuff up about somebody else. So yeah, that would absolutely be part of this. That would be the easiest way to show mechanics, rather than trying to sit there and explain through words how that works, or even try to show it through pictures, because that's sort of a sequence, like showing this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and that's just hard to show. Maybe an animation would be just as good, but that requires more work of actually making the animation, whereas you can just take some graph paper and kind of just show. Third thing, prioritize different features of your game. This is something that is totally optional. Not everybody does it, but it can be super helpful. Basically, you can add in tags that specify how much certain features can change. So what I mean is, if you're writing Mario can jump, you know, it's probably set in stone. So you would maybe you'd have like a legend somewhere or a key of like what different symbols mean if you're using symbols, or just write it in, that this is set in stone. This cannot change. If your development team is referring to this, this is something that will be in the game, that they need to put in the game. If you're putting in Peach wears a pink dress, that'd probably be something this can probably change. That's not a big deal. So if the artist is looking at it and trying to figure out what color scheme would work best, that's something that they can take into account. They can say, okay, well, I can change this. They probably had a reason for it in the first place, but it's something that can be changed. So adding tags like that specify how set in stone certain things are can be really helpful for looking at it later. Whereas if you don't have any of those, you can't really take everything as immovable. I don't know the word. I'm blanking on that word. It's a long word. Who cares? And the last thing I have on here is making your design doc readable. This is kind of something that you'd think would go without needing to specify it, but it totally doesn't. If you write your design doc in Notepad with no paragraph spacings, and you just write it all in one solid block of text, stop it. No one will read that. No one can understand it. Give yourself some section headings of gameplay, game mechanics, story, setting, all of that stuff. Give yourself some headings. Give yourself some goddamn white space, please. You know, space some things. Make it readable, because nobody wants to sit there and read through this. Does Notepad even have pages? 1,000-line, I guess, 1,000-line document about your game with no spacings, and they're just trying to figure it out, and they say, oh, I like the setting part. It was somewhere. They're not going to look through that. They don't want to.
You can make it just one line in Notepad. Just one thing.
Oh my God, stop it. You're like stressing me out just by saying that. I can't even,
It's that page middle.
Oh God.
Oh wait, when you change the scale of the paper, it'll change.
Yeah.
So you just take your paper and stretch and all the words.
How about you just do one word on each line?
That'd be
72 fonts.
Would that be arguably easier? I feel like reading a sentence would be. Okay, you know what? This is stupid. I don't know why I'm getting into this. Anyways, do you have anything else for design docs?
When you're prioritizing, that doesn't just have to apply to your gameplay. Priorities can be extended to, say if the reason you're making this game is I want to make a platformer. You know, when the genre is platformer, having that specified as, you know, this is the reason you're making the game, it's not going to change. A lot of other things go in it. Can change, but at its heart, you want to make a platformer, so it should be a platformer. Or, you know, for the setting, you want this to take place in like 18th century Ireland for whatever reason. Well, then that's your setting. They should stick to it. I don't know why I chose that.
There's plenty of good reasons why that would be good.
Yeah, but
I'm making my next game in 1800s Ireland.
18th century would be 1700s. Get out of here.
I'm sorry. I'm tired.
Cool, I forgot everything. But yeah, if there's a specific reason, not necessarily you. We talk a lot of stuff like you, as if, you know, you're the one making this. It's equally likely that you'll be reading someone else's, and keeping in mind, you know, the kind of stuff, the reason they're making the game, and what should change, and what is absolutely the whole focus of, you know, the project they're doing. That's really important. So you can extend it to more things than just the gameplay features.
Yeah. Cool. Any questions about design docs before we move into something else? I actually wanted to bring up one more point that I forgot to write down, but I realized on the way here. I had forgotten about this. The design doc should not be your first instance of writing things down, if that wasn't clear. How many of you guys have one of these of varying sizes? Your game dev. Gross. Your sort of game dev ideas journal that you have. You guys, because if you don't have one of these, you should get one of these. You can literally write it on toilet paper if you need to. Like, write it on something. Write it down. Because your memory might be the best memory ever, and you'll still forget small details that you wanted to come up with. Or, if you're me, very big details and everything else. So, have something to write it down in. This should be your step one. Your design doc should be like your step 4 in documenting things. But your design doc, the reason it's important is because it's the first time you're actually formally documenting everything, where you're writing down, okay, this is actually what is going into the game. This is during the idea phase. This is writing down all this stuff. Whereas this can just kind of be scribbles and a lot of stupid stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I forgot to write that in. So now I want to design a design doc with you guys.
Doc.
What?
Design doc.
Doc?
Is it going to be a doc or .txt?
It's going to be a .obj. So
It's actually a JPEG.
somebody give me a game that everybody knows.
Mario.
Other than Mario. Everybody does Mario. Unless we're doing Mario.
Sonic.
How many people, okay, how many people don't know enough about the original Sonic the Hedgehog to talk about it? Anybody? We good? All right, Sonic. So, what are we writing down for some of these? Let's go through and sort of figure out what kind of general vibe we want to go for this. So, platform, first thing. What is that on?
Dreamcast?
Was it on the Genesis?
I just said the first thing.
Yeah, the Dream Sphere. Yeah.
Yeah, Dream Sphere. Jupiter.
Game Sphere, shut up, whoever said that.
It's a game's colors.
Genesis?
Genesis. SIS.
No, this letter. The one after N. Help me out, please. E. I heard E. I'm hoping you're right.
That looks about right.
If that's wrong, I am no longer stupid. It's whoever said E, so deal with that. So that's the platform. Genre. Probably write down 2D platformer, I'm assuming. I don't know what else you'd specify it as, so 2D plat. What else? Gameplay. Okay, so this is where we can go into a little bit more detail with things. So, what do we got? Well, going fast sounds great, but we need to quantify that. We need to actually talk about what is actually going on. So let's say game mechanics. What do we got? We got character can move. Can move horizontally. Okay, what else? Jump vertically. How many jumps? Single? Yeah.
Wait, no. Too complicated. Yes.
Cole, you want to write these?
Sure.
Yeah, cool. That'll make it easier to multitask. So, move horizontally, jump vertically. What else?
Momentum.
Yep, momentum plays a big part. Write that. Can roll into a ball. Yes, probably. Sonic the really stiff hedgehog who just runs and that's it. No, he can roll into a ball. He can.
Shoot lasers from his eyes?
Probably not. I don't know what kind of cheat code you're using, but I never found that one.
I think that's one of the probably can change ones.
Yeah, okay, yeah, sure. So, let's move away from gameplay for a second. Let's go to setting. What is the setting of this game? How would we specify that? What's up?
Wouldn't rings be a part of?
Oh, absolutely. Collectibles would be part of there. Power-ups, we could specify the different power-ups. I'm saying for the sake of time, we should probably move on. Just because, making the design doc isn't that fast. I'm just trying to go through. Easy example. So setting, what would the setting, how would somebody describe the setting of Sonic?
Dystopian future.
So the player plays as a blue hedgehog. You don't have to write all this down.
Okay, good.
All right, write fast. Player plays as a blue hedgehog. Yep, with cool sneakers. Real edgy.
Likes chili dogs.
Likes chili. Okay, likes. There's someone imprisoning the woodland creatures as robots, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the plot, sort of?
He's powering his robots with.
Has anybody actually played the original Sonic the Hedgehog?
I watched some of this.
Okay, we got some people. Good.
There's only like that he actually made funny robots.
I think all the robots are woodland creatures. So either way, he's imprisoning nice woodland creatures. So, Yeah, that would probably be the setting. Story. Is there really a story to Sonic the Hedgehog?
Sonic 06?
We're not talking about garbage. We're talking about Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sonic Forces?
Like I said, no, I'm not getting into that. I'm not getting into that. That was a joke. Please don't harass me for that. For the original Sonic, there's not really much of a story, so you might just omit the entire story section, to be honest, as just
Yeah, well,
as you play. Like, there's no real.
I guess you could have like the general, like, you know, even in Mario, you'd say like the story is you go to the castles and rescue the princess. That's the narrative that progresses.
Wouldn't that be that would probably be more in gameplay though? Of that's what you literally do. Like those are the actions you take rather than the plot points that change.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you could have, but as I roll.
You could put it wherever. You could omit the story section and put it in gameplay, or you could put that info in story.
The story versus setting. The setting is like established stuff that's already there when you boot up the game. The story is the narrative that progresses as you play it.
Yeah, yeah. So art style. I mean, art style and music is kind of already set. So art style's 16-bit.
Yeah, 16-bit.
Looks nice. Pseudo isometric. What do you want to call it? It's like kind of 3D, but not. Just good art. I don't know. Music and sound, whatever the fuck noises the Genesis made. That's some weird, good but weird. Marketing, they've already done that. So what I would, the point of this was I just wanted to go through some of the easier examples of, okay, this is what you could write. Because next we're going to go into something with a little bit more detail. So who likes doing stuff at these meetings? Too bad. I want you guys to get into groups of, give me a number, between 4 and 5.
4.5.
Not.
Do you need an integer?
Wait, yeah, that's impossible.
4.5, I'll let you figure that out. Get into groups of 4 or 5 with the people around you.
Okay.
And say your names or whatever icebreaker stuff you gotta do. Jump into some groups.